Bennett and Davis address why going small worked for Virginia. Chris Graham here at Augusta Free Press. Bennett being Tony Bennett, Davis being Hubert Davis. Got comments from them after the game last night. Virginia's 65-58 win over North Carolina. It was a game that for the long stretch seemed like sort of act three of last year's two beatdowns by North Carolina of a Virginia team that didn't make the NCAA tournament. North Carolina made the NCAA title game. It was only 36-31, though, at the 15-12 mark of the second half. It just felt like more because it just felt like North Carolina was getting what it wanted. Virginia was getting nothing. I guess a couple of fast break buckets by Reese Beekman. Carolina missing some shots that were open that just kind of rimmed out, kept it close. But at the 15-12 media timeout, you looked at Virginia's situation. Carolina getting great looks on offense. There was a freshman, Jalen Washington, who came in for the injured Armando Bacot, who only played a minute and 19 seconds, hurt his foot. X-rays negative today, so who don't know his status for Saturday. I think UNC plays Louisville, but Carolina didn't really miss Bacot. They got the numbers, at least in the first half, from Washington. A former four-star recruit had to miss his senior season with an ACL injury and only played in parts of, I think it was 6 games coming into this one for North Carolina. Didn't get a lot of minutes. Got a lot of minutes last night because of the injury of Bacot, but North Carolina is known for this. They're known for having a guy or two or more behind really good ensconced starters who have to sit for a year or two before they finally get their own playing time. And in this case, Washington took the opportunity. He was 5 of 7 from the field in the first half, 12 points in 11 minutes. And the Bacot, coming in, averaging 18.8 points, 11.2 rebounds. That was Bacot-like numbers from Washington. When Virginia would try to trap the ball with their hard hedges on pick and rolls, North Carolina seemed to have the answer. They'd get the ball moving around. Virginia was chasing. Carolina was either making the open threes or getting the ball back in the post, getting fouled. It was like a circus out there. And on offense now, Virginia tried everything and couldn't get anything going. Great game playing by Hubert Davis, great execution by the Carolina players. Bennett tried I've seen it called the middle third offense, basically moving the screens in his offense. It's a motion offense, moving the screens from the sides to the middle, coming up the post, out to the 3-point line from there, the top of the circle from there. That didn't work. So about halfway through the first half, he just went back to the mover blocker. That didn't work. And so at that 15-12 timeout, what's Bennett to do? He's tried everything. Nothing's working. So he went to a lineup he had not used literally all season long. I looked it up last night. There's a website, evanmaya.com. You can look at lineup-specific information about teams. And the lineup that he rolled out there at the 15-12 mark, it was a little bit of a gamble. It was actually very much of a gamble. 4 guards, Kihei Clark, Reese Beekman, Isaac McNeely, Armand Franklin, and the center was Ben Vanderplas, who might as well be a guard. He's 6'8", but he plays like a small forward. Big guy, but he's a perimeter shooter, and but he can defend in the post. Virginia, hey, it worked. Outscored Carolina 34-21 the rest of the way, 165-58. So looking into how this worked, first key is Ben Vanderplas. There's a good Vanderplas and a bad Vanderplas. I've noted this. Last night he ended up with 17 points, 14 in the second half. That's his 5th game at Virginia. Virginia is now 15 games in, so 1/3 of his games have been double-digit games. 6 games with 3 points or less. So you either get the good Vanderplas or you get the bad Vanderplas. Last night Virginia got the very good Vanderplas, especially in the second half. But even you don't get a lot of the good Vanderplas if he can't defend the 5 position. And he showed he could do that back in November, the win at Michigan. Virginia was down 11 at halftime in that one. And Bennett, he didn't necessarily go small. He played Vanderplas a lot alongside Jaden Gardner at the 4, but he played Vanderplas at the 5 against 7-1 Hunter Dickinson, guy who's projected in NBA, maybe late first round, early second round pick. And he played well. Dickinson had 14 in the first half, only 2 of 9 from the field in the second half. And with that in the memory bank, Bennett was confident he could go to Vanderplas and not necessarily lose a lot, if anything, on defense in the post. And it actually worked there too. After the big first half from Washington, he only had 1 point. one free throw. He was 0-4 from the field in 16 minutes in the second half. So, and Bennett was asked after the game if they did anything different on Washington, in addition to having Vander Plas on him. He said no. And Vander Plas actually said the same thing, that, and he, and it's not just humility, even though that's a staple of Virginia's program, the humility being one of the 5 pillars. He rightly credited the principles of the pack line defense. He said his job was to, he mentioned, I'm kind of looking at the quote here. They were trying to get post feeds early in the half on the block in front of their bench. So his job was just to force him to catch it away from the block. So then guys like Reese Beekman, Kie Clark, Isaac McNeely could kind of, help after if he pushed him out far enough, so to speak, to on the entry pass, then the guards could kind of help out, kind of clog things up, make him get rid of the ball. And that happened a lot. And so that took Carolina out of what they were doing. Not only does it take, you got a guy who was 5 of 7 from the field. He's not shooting the ball effectively, but also the fact you're still trying to feed him means, and it's not working, and it takes him a few seconds to make that decision, pass it out. Shot clock's 30 seconds, and it's ticking down every second, no matter what the situation is there. So that then ends up forcing bad shots by the offense when the ball's kind of spun around there. The second key for Virginia was on offense, attacking the paint. I mentioned the offense just felt clogged up. The great game plan by Davis, great execution by his team. And so what Bennett was hoping to do with Vander Plas to 5 was draw Washington away from the rim and also just away from the post to sort of create some driving lanes for Beekman and Clark. Sorry about the coughing. I've still got a little bit of that cold from a few weeks ago. So draw Washington away really just to create those driving lanes and put pressure on the rim, put pressure on the paint like Tony likes to do. Hubert Davis said that those dribble drives by Clark and Beekman were what turned the game around. I should say Beekman and Clark. Was actually Beekman who was the initiator more last night. And he said it was straight line drives to the bucket. It was just simple defense that Carolina was not executing when Virginia went to that offensive philosophy. And he said it really had nothing to do with Bacot not being in the game. He said, straight line drives to the basket. It doesn't matter if Bacot's back there. Bacot's not necessarily a big shot blocker anyway. He's a good defensive player, but he's not going to necessarily a race at the rim the way, for example, a Caden Shedrick can. Virginia, in the numbers then, 11 of 29 before that 15-12 media timeout, 12 of 23 after that media timeout, and 5 of those makes were at the rim, 4 dunks and a layup. 2 of the dunks were actually rebound dunks off of missed layups. So Virginia was creating stuff at the rim and able to clean it up when they were missing the shots. Vander Plas was a key there too. He had a couple of big threes. After he was stretching the floor, and then when Carolina started focusing the defensive effort on, okay, let's prevent those straight line drives because we're getting beat to the basket. That left Vander Plas open at the 3-point line. He made a 3 that gave Virginia, as it turns out, the lead for good at the 12:52 mark, and then he had another one at the 9:25 mark that concluded the 17-2 run that took Virginia from down 5 to up 10. Carolina was able to get it down to 3 a couple times late, but Virginia was able to, to space out. Big 3 by Isaac McNeely late. I think it was 2:21 to go. Helped give some breathing room there as well. And also, interestingly enough, not only with Vander Plas, creating the driving lanes by just floating around the perimeter and taking Washington with him, but that also created, there were 4 different plays where Armand Franklin was able, he scored 3 times in the post, the 6'4" guard. He had Seth Trimble, a 6'3" guard, on him in the post. He took Trimble into the post, hit a little kind of a flip shot that it was ruled a jumper on the official score, but then actually had a couple of post layups and then got fouled one time. Missed both free throws, unfortunately, but created 4 scoring opportunities, converted on 3 of them. Franklin in the post. Excuse me for the coughing again. So, that's getting to the rim as well. That's part of it. So I've mentioned the first key was, just the ability to play defense with the small lineup. The second key then was attacking the paint. The third key was Bennett sticking with it. You see it happen all the time where a coach makes an adjustment going away from the game plan. The adjustment works, and you get the game going back in your favor, And then you say, okay, let's go back to the game plan. Let's, in his case, he could have gone back to his starting lineup. Virginia's starting lineup, by the way, according to that evanmaya.com website, Virginia's starting lineup of Beekman and Clark in the backcourt, along with Franklin, and then in the front court, Gardner and Shedrick, it's the fourth most efficient starting lineup in all of college basketball. So we're not talking about, okay, let's just, bring some chuckers in. I mean, we're talking about bringing a very effective starting lineup back in. He didn't, he stuck with it. 15-12. Hey, let's just go with it. And Reese Beekman addressed this after the game. He said, I definitely feel like we had to kind of rhythm going with the guys on the court. We were kind of all in sync with the offense we were running, the way we were getting open shots. He didn't mention defensively, but also defensively. Now, he did concede that it was tough physically. If when you're playing 15-12 of a game against a high-level opponent like North Carolina, and Hubert Davis wasn't subbing liberally, but he was subbing during that stretch. And there were there were 3 media timeouts, I guess the 11, 8, and 4. Carolina called at least 2, maybe 3 timeouts, either momentum stalling or trying to reset after a made basket, the old Dean Smith approach to things when his team's down. There were several opportunities for Tony Bennett to make changes schematically, lineup-wise, and he didn't. And so the quote from Beekman, it was definitely a grind towards the end. Everybody was tired. We just worked out a lot in the offseason for moments like this to be able to withstand these long moments and being able to play this type of minutes, and that definitely paid off. So, hey, it did. And this is something now that Bennett has in his back pocket. He's not going to come out and start the 4-guard lineup, and he's not going to go exclusively with it or use that as his base lineup going down the rest of the season. You're going to see Gardner and Shedrick back out there for the opening tip against Florida State. But this is just something that if things bog down, it's another thing that Tony Bennett can use to try to, if nothing else, just jar the game from where it is, kind of change the rubric a little bit of the game. So that's just another bit of his arsenal as this season plays out. Virginia now 12-3 overall, 4-2 in the ACC. We'll turn our attention, I guess, starting to think this through. It's already tomorrow's already Thursday, so we'll turn our attention to Florida State on Thursday. I'm going to make sure that's actually the game. I'm just doing that from memory, but we'll turn our attention to the next opponent. And give me a second here I'll try to filibuster as I'm also looking something up. This is what having a co-host can do for you sometimes. Let's see here. As we're playing through here, Saturday. Yeah, Virginia's at Florida State at 4:00 on ESPN2. And these two teams have already played this year, so that 5-11 record for Florida State, don't get too excited about that. We know this team played in Charlottesville and played Virginia to a 5-point game. Florida State's 3-2 in the ACC. Now their wins are over Louisville, Notre Dame, and Georgia Tech, basically the other bad teams in the ACC. But they won the games. Their losses are to Duke and Virginia. So we'll get you ready for it. We've already got a feel for what Florida State has lineup-wise, and how they'll play the game. Virginia has a healthier Reese Beekman. That's another important matter. I'll do feature stories tomorrow. This is being recorded Wednesday night. Thursday, I'll have feature stories on focusing on Ben Vanderplas and on Reese Beekman. But Beekman, I've already done the work on the stories. I just have to write the stories out. The word on Beekman is he feels like he's healthy. He's still working on at the training with trainers on continue to work on getting full flexibility and strength. He had an ankle injury. He had a hamstring injury. So. But you saw last night the explosiveness was back. If nothing else, you saw it. The game was 61-58, inside of a minute to go. Vanderplas pulled him off, slip screen. Vanderplas floated out to the 3-point line. Both Carolina defenders went with Vanderplas, and Beekman split the defenders and went in for a thunderous dunk to clinch the game. You saw it there. That's the first time. In fact, one of the reporters noted after the game, that's the first dunk he had since the injury back at the Michigan game in November. So that tells you right there that Beekman he's getting back. So Virginia will play Florida State with a healthy Beekman. The Florida State game was the first game after the Michigan game, and he wasn't healthy in that one. And Virginia struggled. So we'll see how Virginia does with a fully healthy Reese Beekman. But anyway, we'll get you previewed for that one. And a little bit following up, looking at a couple individual players and what they've been able to do for this Virginia team this season, and Beekman and Vanderplas. And we'll figure out what else to get into. We might get into some UVA football. We had a couple of stories yesterday. John Paul Flores transferring to, gotta remember where he's transferring to. He's going to Louisville. The offensive lineman who only was here for a year after transferring from Dartmouth. And Billy Kemp, who played 5 years at Virginia, using his 6th year, he's going to go to Nebraska. And we had that story yesterday. So go back if you're interested in learning more about Brennan Armstrong going to North Carolina State. We had a piece on that earlier this week. So UVA football, UVA basketball, and we'll see what else we can get into. Hey, if there's anything you want me to look into specifically, UVA sports related or otherwise, email me at chris@augustafreepress.com.